How do you think this rubs off on Nigeria's democracy?
I think it's in terms of Muhammadu Buhari and his chances for re-election. He has the incumbency behind him, and it's in our mind it's unlikely that he would lose the election in February, as he does have the incumbency behind him. So he's likely to try and convince the electorate that he needs another 4 years to realise his goals that he set out prior to the 2015 elections, such as tackling insecurity, getting the economy back on track. Atiku Abubakar is going to try and convince the electorate that they need someone different to try and revive the economy. And that's really going to be his main campaign issue. The recent midterm state elections in Osun State and Ekiti State perhaps set the tone for the next few months. So electoral observers will be watching very closely for any signs of voter intimidation and so on. And both parties are going to be very keen to convey to the rest of the world that this election is going to be free and fair.
Right. So let's assume that the elections come and go relatively peacefully and we have a winner. What's your view on the risk outlook for Nigeria? Depending on who emerges as president, we could have a situation where Muhammadu Buhari continues. So what does more of the same mean for you in terms of risk? And if we were to see a change of the guards, what do you anticipate?
That's a good question, Wally. And I think what we tell investors and clients that we work with in Nigeria is that regardless as to who's at the helm of the presidency and who takes over for the next 4 years or indeed the next 8 years, the problems that are in Nigeria in terms of its dependency on oil, the lack of diversification away from oil, and the persistent insecurity that continues to plague pockets of the country, those issues are going to be there regardless of who takes over in the presidency. Both Buhari and Abubakar are going to have to deal with those issues. So regardless of who's at the helm, those issues are going to persist. But likewise, like what we tell clients and potential investors looking at Nigeria, its credentials are going to remain. The huge market that it offers, the diverse economy, it's very attractive to potential investors. So there's both positive and negatives will remain regardless of who's at the top.
Gillian, contrary to the doomsday predictions that we saw leading up to the 2015 elections in Nigeria, there have been no predictions of disintegration for the country. But in terms of preparedness and readiness for the 2019 elections, what is your assessment?
So I think the midterm governorship elections, like I said, in Osun and Ekiti, were slight a test run for INEC, the Electoral Commission in Nigeria. So they will be learning lessons from those elections. Looking ahead, we expect there to be a tighter race in some of the states, particularly in the Middle Belt and in the northern region. So the north is generally what we've considered Buhari's stronghold, but Atiku Abubakar is going to try and erode that stronghold that he has in the northern states. Particularly in the swing states, in the Middle Belt, the Southwest, we are likely to see a tighter contest. And where we generally see a tighter run and a tighter contest occurring, there can be outbreaks of violence. So watchers that have been in Nigeria for previous elections, 2011 for instance, we saw outbreaks of violence in Kaduna City. So again, we just need to be aware of those tighter states and how that might likely to play out in the next few months.
All right. Gillian, earlier Christy mentioned that we're not hearing any doomsday predictions ahead of these polls, but I'd like you to carefully compare these polls with 4 years ago. Many had suggested then that whoever emerged as president will be inheriting huge problems. But looking forward into into the future of Nigeria's economy, given where we are in terms of revenues and, of course, the piling debt, or the government debt that we have right now. What's your view on the outlook for the economy, and what will be the challenge of whoever emerges as president?
Yes, that's true. I think whoever inherits the presidency, whoever wins the president's race next February, will still have to really approach the economy and in similar lines that Buhari's been trying to do in the past 4 years, trying to diversify the economy away from this economic mainstay, oil. And Nigeria remains largely reliant on oil. We saw really the vulnerability Nigeria has to that dependence because 2 years prior to Buhari taking over as president, the oil price decline and crash really had dire consequences for Nigeria, and it's been struggling to rebound from that recession, its first recession in 2 decades ever since. So Nigeria, and whoever takes over from Buhari, or if Buhari manages to win a second term, will have to deal with those issues of diversifying away from the oil economy, basically to reduce this dependence on commodities. Also, the youth unemployment also remains a huge issue. So and that goes hand in hand really with the diversification efforts. The more the economy can diversify away from oil, its dependency on oil, the better chance there is for reducing those unemployment rates.